Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Candace, and I'm an event manager. On behalf of Town Hall Seattle, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's live stream presentation with Donna Miscolta, Sarah E Mcquate, Anne Liu Kellor, and Rebecca Delacruz-Gunderson as part of our Arts and Culture series. As we get underway, I would like to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continued use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. Thank you for tuning in. Town Hall is proud to be a community-focused organization and a place where we can share and sustain ideas and creativity, even if it means we can't gather in person. I'd like to thank Donna, Sarah, Anne, and Rebecca for appearing tonight to help make that possible. If you share in Town Hall's vision for a robust community engaged in the arts, science, and culture, where everyone has a voice, please consider supporting us tonight by making a donation or becoming a member. Town Hall is adding new events and podcasts every day. Upcoming programs include our friends at Institute for Systems Biology presenting Dr. Temple Grandin for a delightful exploration of the world around us and how we can all be amateur scientists. Charles Wolfe is in conversation with the In the Moment co-host Steve Scher to discuss strategies for creating and enhancing distinctive city culture. And housing expert Dana Borland talks with GRIST's Clayton Aldern to discuss how the climate crisis is connected to the housing crisis. You can check out more of what's upcoming by visiting our online calendar at townhallseattle.org. Tonight's presentation will be about 60 minutes. I should say conversation will be about 60 minutes. That will include Q&A, a portion for Q&A from you. Questions will be selected from those in the chat field at the bottom of the video player, so please submit those at any time. You can also text questions to 206-504-2857 as noted in the chat. We can't guarantee that we'll get to every question, but we'll get to as many as we can. Please keep your questions concise. For those who would like to view the program with closed captions, you can click the CC button in the bottom right corner of the video player, and the program will be available for rewatching immediately following the event. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. Our Arts and Culture series is supported by For Culture, Arts Fund, Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, the Norcliffe Foundation, and Winco Foundation Northwest. Finally, Town Hall is a member-supported organization, so I want to thank all of our members watching tonight as well. And now for this evening's event. Donna Miscolta is an author who has published 3 books. Her story collection, Hola and Goodbye, Una Familia in Stories, was published in 2016, and her first book, When the Delacruz Family Danced, was published in 2011. Recent essays have appeared in the Los Angeles Review and the anthology Alone Together, Love, Grief, and Comfort in the Time of COVID-19. She has work forthcoming. It is called Indomitable Indomitables, a multi-genre Chicanx, Latinx women's anthology. Sarah E McQuate is a half-Black, half-white scientist turned science writer. McQuaid has had her science stories published in a variety of outlets, including Nature and Science. She lives in Seattle and writes about research news from the University of Washington's College of Engineering and Information School. Sarah spends her free time reading, exploring, photographing the Pacific Northwest, and learning how to figure skate. Anne Liu Kellor is a mixed-race Chinese-American writer, editor, coach, and teacher based in Seattle. She's the recipient of fellowships from Hedgebrook, Seventh Wave, Jack Straw Writers Program, For Culture, and Hypatia in the Woods. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Her essays have appeared in publications such as Long Reads, Fourth Genre, Witness, New England Review, and more. Keller's memoir, Heart Radical, A Search for Language, Love, and Belonging, is forthcoming in September 2021. And Rebecca Delacruz-Gunderson is a half Filipina, half white Washingtonian who loves reading, running, writing, and hiking. She's worked in college counseling, served as a field director for a state senator, lived in Singapore for 5 months, tutored local students, and taught essay writing classes. She aspires to be a high school English teacher and is very excited to begin her master's in English at the University of British Columbia this fall. All of our speakers tonight engaged in a class called Shapeshifting, Reading and Writing the Mixed Race Experience. They're here tonight to discuss their findings and reflections on the course with us. Please join me in welcoming Donna Miscolta, Sarah E McQuate, Anne Liu Kellor, and Rebecca Delacruz-Gunderson.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this discussion, as well as brief readings from our work. The title of this event is The Mixed Race Identity, Writing to See Ourselves, and it's derived from the title of a class that Seattle writer Anne Liu Kellor recently taught called Shapeshifting, Reading and Writing the Mixed Race Experience. I'm going to start off by briefly telling what my interest was in Anne's class. Then Anne will talk a little bit about why and how she came to develop the class, which provided the necessary space to think deeply and talk openly about how we've been affected by such issues as race and color, and the question, what are you? Rebecca and Sarah will talk about why they took the class and what awareness of themselves as a mixed writer they brought to the class and what they took away. We'll each read a short piece that we've written, and then I'll post some questions for discussion among ourselves. And we'll save time at the end to respond to questions from the viewers. What we hope to do during the time we have is to give a sense of the challenges that mixed writers confront in terms of where we fit in the literary community, as well as our work and social communities and our families. In terms of the mixed identity, my own situation can be described as mixed heritage. I'm Filipino and Mexican. Most of the others in the class were of more than one race, Asian and white or Black and white, which gave their experiences a different dimension. However, the issue of in-betweenness and the question about where we fit is something that we share. In creating fictional characters, I've avoided the mixed character, opting instead to create protagonists that are either Filipino-American, as was the case in my first novel, or Mexican-American, as was the case in my 2 story collections. As a fiction writer, I focus on the themes of assimilation, identity, belonging, and family, all of which inevitably brings in the role of race at some level. My most recent book of fiction especially deals with both systemic racism and microaggressions, as seen through the eyes of Angie Rubio, a young Mexican-American girl whose education in school offers her lessons not necessarily taught in the classroom. In living color, a lot of the incidents are derived from my own experience growing up. For instance, when Angie is always given the role of monster to play in childhood make-believe games, or when she's told in elementary school that she's in the dumb class and realizes that most of her classmates are brown like her, or the class designated as smart has mostly white kids. Recently, I've spent time writing and thinking about writing essays about the themes that I've focused on in my fiction. This is where I've been able to explore the 2 sides of me, separately and together. I'm considering my parents' and grandparents' lives, but also the larger historical picture of colonization and immigration and their consequences through generations. And I want to acknowledge here For Culture for providing funding for this project, the one that I've been working on essays, which so far consists of about 20 or so mostly short essays. And one of the reasons I decided to take Anne's class was because it was about both reading and writing the mixed experience. And I was interested in what she would have us read and what inspiration I could take from these readings. It was a class of exploration and introspection, with plenty of writing prompts to provoke memories and uncover new aspects and emotions related to them. So what inspires, or maybe what compels someone to create a class like this? Here's Anne to talk about that.
Thank you, Donna. So I always teach towards what I most want to explore in myself. And although I've been writing and reading about race and identity for many, many years, for most of my life, I had never been in a class or a community of just mixed race people. And so I've been feeling this growing urge to do so over the years. And, I've attended some racial equity trainings, which have been great, but those are often too short and not intimate enough to build trust and, to really delve deeper into my own experiences. And then in these trainings as well, we're often asked to go to do racial caucusing and break out into the white group and the group for people of color. And although at this stage in my life and racial identity, I very much identify as a person of color and know and understand the ways in which my experiences overlap with other people of color, I also have never felt comfortable taking up space in these forums talking about my identity issues, questions of not knowing how people see me, not knowing if I am trusted in these groups, feelings of erasure, feelings of not knowing if my experience is important, feelings of shame around my own privilege or around my own internalized bias towards people or towards myself. So I always felt like I had something to learn and to explore from both sides of this conversation, both when it comes to internalized racism and things, microaggressions I've experienced and also ones I've inflicted on others. But those did not feel like the right kinds of spaces to explore this. And I have a long history too of just silencing myself and being more comfortable as a listener. So to be able to create a class like this was really groundbreaking for me. And I knew that if I needed it and was 4 years old when I taught the first one and 46 when I taught the next one, and had never experienced something like this for myself, then I knew that it was likely that other people needed a space like this too. And I don't think I realized quite how much people needed it and how rare it was to find a space like this before we convened. And also because I'm a writing teacher and a writer, and I know the benefits of writing as opposed to just getting in a group and talking, I really wanted to make the class generative and give people a lot of time to free write from prompts. And in order to create a space where people could feel safe delving into this really vulnerable, tender, often traumatic, and topic full of confusion and fear and shame, I knew I had to set clear guidelines around, first and foremost, being free to express whatever you need to express in a really raw, messy, unfinished way. And then clear guidelines around how people listen and receive and respond to the sharing. I really try to give space for everybody to speak, having been the quietest person in the class for a great part of my life, knowing how some people can dominate and how important that is. And then I also like to model vulnerability in my classes and write alongside with everybody. And then as far as choosing the readings, I had the binder this thick, so I had to narrow it down from, just writing that I've admired throughout my life, but also really wanting to choose writing from, a diversity of mixes. So definitely not just all people who are mixed with white, although there's a lot of writing that comes from that, because obviously that is the binary that's set up between white and people of color that really causes a lot of questioning and conflict. And then also a mixture of some materials that I'd gotten from trainings, more theoretical stuff, and just pushing up against it, instead of just accepting what we're given, just, pushing up against it and trying to see how our different experiences overlap and converge and diverge, because they're not all the same, but what are the commonalities? So that's all I'll say for now. But yeah, it was an awesome experience.
Well, it was awesome for us too. And it was clear that you put a lot of thought and planning into it. And so I was really happy that I signed up. And when I think about entering a new class, there's always a little bit of anticipation about who else will be there, who else I'll get to meet there. And at this stage of my life, I turned 68 in a couple of weeks. So it's likely that at this point, any space I enter, I will be among the oldest, if not the oldest in the room. And so there's always a question in my mind of my relevancy. But logging into this Zoom class for the first time was really heartening and reassuring, because even though everybody looked quite young to me, they looked familiar, like faces whose stories I could relate to despite generational differences. And among those faces were Rebecca's and Sarah's, who will each now talk about why she took the class and what awareness as a mixed writer she brought to the class and what she took away. And so we'll start with Rebecca, and Sarah will follow right after.
Great. Thank you so much, Donna. So I found Anne's class at a time where I was thinking much more about race and identity, and also my identity as a writer. I've obviously always been mixed, and I've almost always been a writer in some form, but I feel like I wasn't able to proudly claim both of these identities together until this class. Most of my life, I felt very white-ish. There was a time just a few years ago where I was included in an event for people of color, and I remember distinctly being genuinely confused why I was there. And then I kind of remembered that I wasn't white, and that might sound ridiculous, but because I had the privilege of growing up in an environment where I didn't feel out of place, I think I just always saw whiteness reflected back at me in the media and really didn't feel Asian growing up. I was actually just listening to one of my favorite authors, Min-Jin Lee, on the podcast Asian Enough, and she was talking about how there's this conscious effort to make you feel disconnected from your Asian Americanness. So of course you're not going to be encouraged to claim and celebrate that identity. And I think when you're part white, that can be amplified and complicated in another way. So I definitely did not feel Asian enough to be Asian for a long time. And then at the same time, I've spent a long time suppressing my identity as a writer. In college, I tried to force myself to be a doctor, a software engineer, and a lawyer before deciding I was actually just gonna stand up for myself and do what I actually wanted to do. So I'm finally about to go to grad school for English, and I'm really excited about teaching one day eventually. So when I saw the title of Anne's class on the Hugo House website, I just immediately signed up. I didn't even know something like that could exist. And like Donna was just saying, logging into Zoom that first time was really magical. It was this feeling that I didn't even know I needed, as Anne was alluding to earlier as well, and a feeling I didn't even know was possible. There's such a pervasive narrative that being mixed means you're confused or lost or caught between cultures or don't belong, but this community made me realize all of the ways that being mixed is a strength, and that we can create our own spaces and find a really powerful sense of belonging with one another. And throughout our class, I also came to realize that writing, I think, is a natural form for many of us, perhaps because we're constantly being asked to tell our stories. People ask us all the time, "What are you?" or "Where are you from?" So there's this persistent need to explain ourselves. And although, of course, this can be quite annoying sometimes, this class helped me realize that it's also a great opportunity to rewrite our own narratives, because language is so often insufficient for us. You know, I can't just say I'm Asian. I can't just say I'm white. If I only say I'm mixed, you have no idea what my background is. Or, you know, take another phrase like interracial marriage. If you're more than one race, like we are, I guess every relationship we're in is interracial, so it loses its meaning in a way. So this class and all of the women in this class helped me see that being a mixed writer really is an amazing thing, because we already know that language falls short in so many ways. And we already know that we need new words and phrases and forms and stories. So I'm just overwhelmingly grateful that Anne created this space for us, and Donna invited me here today, and every other woman in our class was vulnerable enough to share part of her story, because this community of brilliant women really helped me find my voice. And I really finally feel like I am enough of a mixed race writer.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks, Donna, for inviting me here. I want to echo something that Anne said about silencing yourself, because I think for a really long time, I silenced my voice as a writer, and just in general, I silenced my voice about myself. And especially over the past year, I've just felt this burning need to like, I need to tell my story. I need to find my voice and figure out how to tell my story and how to talk about who I am. And so I started embarking on writing classes. Like, we're going to figure this out. And I took a memoir class in the fall, and it was good in some ways because it was like, yay, I'm writing again. But it was really disappointing in other ways. And I was basically burnt out. And I was like, well, that was fun. I guess it's over now. And my friend was like, well, let me see. I have a friend who's been taking classes at the Hugo House. Let me see if she has any suggestions. And her friend was like, well, I don't know if Sarah's mixed race, but Anne is an amazing teacher. So if she is mixed race, she should take this class. And I was like, oh, and then signed up for it immediately, basically without even thinking about it. And I think partially a lot of the times when I have written things, they always are sort of exploring that my identity and exploring being mixed race and what it means and who am I and can I claim this part of me or not? I don't know. And so I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to get out of this class. And I'm like kind of grumpy about writing and writing classes, but pretty sure this class is what I need because it's literally about the mixed race experience, which just seems to be what I like writing about. So let's just take it. And I got there, and this class, I think, like everybody said, it was transformative, both for me and my writing. For me, I think, again, being in a space where, being in between was normal. And I have issues with labels of myself. I don't really like putting myself into boxes, and like literally hearing those words coming out of somebody else's mouth, like multiple times in the class, somebody would say something and I was like, I've said that. Like I literally have that written right here. Was just incredible. It was an incredible experience to feel like people understood me and my experience. And then more so, my writing itself also was transformed by this class, when I realized that a lot of times when I wrote something, I was sort of writing to get a reaction out of white people. So like, I want you to feel mad. I want you to be sad. I want you to be like so upset for poor Sarah or whatever. I'm trying to elicit emotion out of this white person that I'm imagining is reading my work. And I think this class for the first time kind of gave me permission to be like, actually, it's more interesting what's going on inside your head, Sarah. And I think that people actually want to hear that story. So why don't we tell that story instead? And so it's been this like revolutionary shift, and I have to like figure out how to write again, basically, to be able to tell my story for real now. And that's awesome. So thank you, Anne, and thanks everybody. I'm really happy to be here.
So, Sarah, I'm glad that you were able to find the stories that you wanted to write, because Anne's class not only helped generate ideas about what we might want to write about, but she actually got us started writing about them through the free writes. And so now we're going to each read short pieces or excerpts from pieces that we've written related to the topic of mixedness. And so we're going to start with Anne, followed by Sarah, followed by Rebecca, and then I'll follow Rebecca. So take it away, Sarah. Anne.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read an excerpt. It's about half of an essay called Shapeshifting, Discovering the We in Mixed Race Experiences. Sometimes you don't know what you've been longing for your whole life until you experience it. As a mixed race woman, I never knew how much it would mean to me to finally sit in a room full of other multiracial women until at age 45, I taught a creative writing class called Shapeshifting, Reading and Writing the Mixed Race Experience. I was nervous because I'd never attended something like this myself. And yet, sometimes when it becomes clear that you need something that doesn't already exist, you have to create it yourself. I once considered myself to be a shy person, afraid to speak in public. However, my close friends knew me differently at core. And I knew myself differently too. While I remained quiet in high school, college, and beyond, in intimate spaces, I could be bold and funny. When I was younger, I used to think that my insecurities came from my youth or gender. But the older I've gotten, the more I've also come to question how much of my conditioning to feel silent and invisible has come from my race. I am an Asian American woman. I am also mixed race. My father is white and my mother is Chinese. What does it feel like to grow up and never see reflections of yourself or your family in the shows you watch or the books you read? What does it feel like to rarely see yourself in positions of power? What does it feel like to sense you don't exist in the outside world, or to never have been given a language, a book of history, a collection of stories, the perspective of an elder, to help name the lineage you are part of, who you are in relationship to America's history of racism, who you are in relationship to the rules about who is Black or Asian or Native or Latinx or white. 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1 drop. How much blood do you need to be able to claim one identity? Well, that history tells us depends on how white people have wanted to leverage their control over others' bodies or land. That depends on how beneficial it was to claim you as their own. Each community has its unique relationship to history's shaping of mixed race identities, of course. White settlers needed more Black bodies to enslave and control. Therefore, it was advantageous to create the 1-drop rule for African Americans. With Native Americans, however, they decided it would be better to put children in boarding schools, erase their heritage, claim them into whiteness. That way, they could more easily claim their land. And the rest of us descendants of immigrants, our absorption into or exclusion from whiteness depends on the shifting of the wind, or rather, white supremacy culture's needs. Asian Americans, for example, were held up as model minorities to prove America's great myth of meritocracy, used as a wedge against Black people, as in, see, anyone can succeed here if you just try. But we've also been expelled from this country or put in concentration camps, perpetually seen as foreign, dangerous, and other. So where does this leave mixed race people, especially those of us who are mixed with white? It can be confusing to sort out. Many of us who grew up with one white parent or in communities that strive towards whiteness have unconsciously been taught to aspire more towards this. Conversely, others have been encouraged to deny all ties to whiteness, or we choose to lean in that direction ourselves once we realize how much we've been duped by white supremacy culture. But either way, whether we are denying our quote color or denying our quote whiteness, these false binaries can in turn lead us to internalize a sixth sense that a part of us is damaged, inferior, or too shameful to be spoken of. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Anne. All right, I'm gonna start. This is called Untaming the Beast. When I was a kid, my Black mother or my white father would braid my hair every night to keep my unruly mane of waves and ringlets from getting too hot on my neck. It became a favorite bedtime ritual, me plopped on a pillow between someone's knees while they ran a brush through my wet hair, pulling out knots and then locking it up for the night. No more mischief. Once, I left my hair in its braid for a week. It formed a giant dreadlock, and my mom almost had to chop it off. In high school, I discovered that if I sprayed half a bottle of detangler in my hair and brushed it into a ponytail, it would form a hard shell so that no frizzy hairs escaped. I thought that was tolerable. The burgeoning chemist in me diluted the hair detangler, 50% water, 50% detangler, and got the same result. It saved money too. At one point, the hair detangler company changed their spray bottle nozzle. It misted instead of sprayed. I had to keep the last good nozzle and swap it out with each new bottle. I worried I was going to get carpal tunnel in my finger. In grad school, I thought, open quote, weight. This doesn't have to be a burden, something I bind, throw over my shoulder, and forget. This is my connection to my family. Even now, I ask my mom to brush my hair when I'm home. This is mine, and this is me, end quote. I chopped it all off. I left a small puff on my head and sent the rest to locks of love. Sometimes I use conditioner. Sometimes I don't use anything. I think my hair likes this. It gets to be free.
Thank you, Sarah. I am reading an excerpt from the beginning and end of a piece I wrote in Anne's class called Error Messages. 1. Please enter a valid race. I'm applying for a Singaporean visa and it takes me 5 tries to guess my own race. Eurasian finally dispels the error message. In my home country of the US, I am 2 separate boxes, Asian, check, and white, check. In the UK, I am mixed Asian and white, selected from a drop-down menu. When someone asks me what I am, I sometimes want to explain that the answer depends on location and the people around me. Occasionally, I want to reply, what do you think I am? I am a child when my Filipino grandmother calls me Goldilocks. My brown hair is only light at the ends from sun and chlorine, but she touches my head like it's something to be guarded. My parents and I visit her in Manhattan at Christmas time. She turns our family of 3 into 4 as we steer past golden window displays, strands of my hair unspooling from under my hat in the cold wind. Now I understand that she wasn't just complimenting my hair, but my whiteness. I am 20 when my grandma discovers that I'm back together with my Indian boyfriend. She sends me an email. You were raised in America. It would be tragic to enter an entirely different culture and be happy with that choice. Think and reflect, my granddaughter. This is your life. Don't throw it away. My grandmother is a huge fan of the American dream. At 20, she marries my grandfather in the Philippines and becomes pregnant with my mom soon after. She drops out of college, something she'll always regret, and soon has another child, my uncle. When my grandfather gets the opportunity to complete his medical residency in the United States, they move across the world. Initially intending to return to Manila, they stay in the US after Marcos declares martial law in 1972. This is why my mother grows up American in New Jersey. In between the lines of her email, I read her true wish, that I marry someone like my dad, a tall, handsome, successful, nice, white, born in the USA American man. My dad is one of my favorite people in the entire world, but that doesn't mean I should end up with someone just like him or of the same race as him. I self-consciously finger the sun-bleached ends of my hair. How white am I? How Asian am I? I ask these questions knowing that only I can arrive at the answers, and yet I still don't know. Perhaps the questions themselves are flawed, for how can I quantify myself within racial categories that were invented to service white supremacy? The best I can do is describe myself not simply as half and half, but as both, as an estuary where the sea meets the stream. 2. Please fill in the required field. Race. My race is an inheritance, a gift, an ability to shapeshift and slip into spaces that others cannot. It's a surprise. It's the start of a conversation and the end of an assumption, a tribute to my mother and father, a power that comes from being not one or the other, but both. So respectfully, I would like to submit a request to change the restrictions for this answer field because maybe societal categorizations of race are an error, not me.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to read a piece called What I Know About Dismemberment. My father's ears. My Filipino father had big ears. His Filipino father had big ears. I have big ears. Once when I was getting my hair cut, the stylist paid me a compliment. I thought she said I had good hair, which I do, or did. No matter, what she really said was that I have good ears, long lobes, which signal good luck. The long lobes offer ample real estate for adornment, which my ancestors in pre-Spanish times used to full advantage, challenging the tensile strength of their distended lobes with heavy gold jewelry, soon confiscated by the colonizers. I too favor earrings that dangle. Small, delicate studs are lost in my expansive lobes. The ears are the only part of the body that continue to grow as you age. When I'm 80, my ears will be my most prominent feature, hanging like miniature kites on my head. If I live to be 100, maybe my ears will reach my shoulders. I will have to lift them up when I put on a sweater. If my ears were to be cut off, I would lose my resemblance to my father and his father. If I lost my ears, I would lose my luck. My mother's hands. My Filipina Mexican mother had ugly hands. Her Mexican mother had ugly hands. Mendelian genetics insist I continue the pattern. Thick fingers, big knuckles, bumpy with veins and lined with wrinkles, eventually age spots, but strong. I watched my mother make tortillas once. They did not comply with her unpracticed hands, and they ended up in the sink. But her mother's hands worked the masa regularly, the way others before her had done since before Columbus. This, I think, was a source of their strength, which eclipses ugliness. I never took care to moisturize, never had a manicure, never wore fingernail polish, and until I married, never wore rings. Now I wear my mother's ring, a flashy corsage of stones that say, look at me, look at my hands. If you cut off my hands, you will take my inheritance. My grandfather's nose. In 2017, in Plaza Quezon, in Las Piñas, Philippines, I stood where my father might have stood in 1970, on his first and last visit since leaving the Philippines in 1947. Plaza Quezon is where I met Lorenzo, lifelong friend of my father's family. It was the Christmas season, and he was making a parol, from the Spanish farol, nimbly fitting the bamboo sticks together. At first, Lorenzo seemed aloof, even indifferent to my presence, his whole focus on the star-shaped lantern he was constructing, until it was mentioned that I was a descendant of Rosendo. He stood up right away. He looked at me closely with tender scrutiny, and I, sensing a moment, did not flinch. He drew back to deliver his pronouncement, that I had the face of Rosendo. My nose was like his, straight, a relative term concerning Filipino noses. Nonetheless, the comparison sent a shiver of connection down my spine to this place and to my grandfather. My nose is Rosendo's nose. My nose is a mestizo nose, indigenous and Spanish. Cut it off, but the fact of colonization remains. So there's an essay about body parts, but so we have some time to have a little discussion among ourselves. And so one of the things I wanted to pose to the panelists is, what do you think is your biggest obstacle as a mixed writer? Some of you might have touched on this in your introductory remarks, but if you have anything else to add or just want to re-emphasize some of the things that you might have said earlier, the biggest obstacle you see as a mixed writer. Anybody want to start? Or I'll pick on somebody. I'm going to pick on Sarah.
I think the big one, well, we'll just go into more details, I guess. So this kind of, I'm looking at my notes and making myself laugh with this, but I find it's kind of funny. I think I spent a lot of my life pretending to be white passing, which I'm looking at my Zoom reflection. I'm not white passing. So here I am cracking myself up, but hopefully you guys are laughing too. It's kind of funny though, because, you know, I told myself that pretending to be white passing was like it's the safe thing to do, but it's really anything but safe, because it basically forced me to be silenced and silence my voice and myself, which is the reason why I'm in this mess now, because now I'm like, okay, well, but I want to be able to tell my stories. So my biggest obstacle is, this constant reverting back to the silent version of myself.
Anne?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's just not having many models. I mean, there are more and more, but and then that feeling of not belonging to a community, so never having had the chance to speak out loud and, question and dialogue around my questions and experiences. So it was all very private, and in that sense, very fearful of putting it out there and very unsure if anybody could relate. So I think that really has contributed to me like hoarding my work and not sharing it for a long time. And I never could have written an essay from this we point of view before the class, and feeling confident enough to step into the we voice, to feel like I can speak for a we because I've, been a part of that community, and I know it speaks to many people's experiences as well. So.
What about you, Rebecca?
Yeah, one challenge I've thought about, and I know we talked about some in the class, is not knowing what stories I can claim or could talk about. I think especially in terms of family, and if I were to write about the Philippines or my Filipino side of the family, I feel so distant from that culture because I don't speak the language. We grew up eating some of the food, but not a lot, and that's pretty much it. And so it's kind of in this space of being second generation and being Filipina, being mixed Filipina, but not feeling a strong tie to that culture. And what does that mean? And how much claim do I have on that identity and that culture in terms of writing about it is something that I find challenging and would want to continue to explore.
Yeah, for me, I feel sort of the same way because even though I grew up around Filipino, around Mexicans, I never really felt completely a part of either one. And so even though I choose when I write my fictional characters to assign them either Filipino or American or Mexican American, I'm still feeling a little sometimes uncertain because my experience as a Mexican American is so different from many other people. And so I think in terms of finding that space where I could actually write a mixed character in fiction is something that I'm still trying to figure out. Because I think I'm still trying to figure out this whole thing for myself. And even when I did figure it out, I think I still might have some problems on the publishing end because it's like agents and editors are looking for a particular story. And our experiences are not often seen in those stories. So I want to do one more question before we move on and see if we have questions from the audience. And I know I gave you the questions ahead of time, and I was wondering if there's anything in particular that you want to address. I wanted to know, like, who are we writing for? What writers have influenced you as far as helping clarify your sense of self? And then there's a question that's this generational question, So I don't know if there's something that appeals to you that you want to talk about for this segment.
I think one thing sort of on the, you mentioned finding, agents and editors that are looking for mixed race stories. I think on that front, one book that I discovered is this memoir by Melissa Valentine, who is half Black and half white as well. And I found her book, it was sort of one of the first, her book is called The Names of All the Flowers, by the way. It's one of the first times where, like, I mean, I read a lot of books, but usually it's like, oh, I like this book because the main character made me feel something. But this was the first time I think ever where like I was transported back into my own life and reminded of something that apparently is defining of myself that I didn't even know and I'd forgotten because I was like, oh, this isn't whatever, we don't talk about this. And so like she talks about a time where they're at her Black side of the family's reunion and they're at the airport like waiting to get picked up, and it's her dad, her white dad is standing there like an orange bird, puffed up like an orange bird, surrounded by his mixed and Black family. And I just had this like, I was just like transported back to my own Black family reunion with my white dad there, and I was like, oh, I didn't even like, again, like I said, like I didn't even realize that this was something that was so like defining of who I am until she pointed it out. And so that was really awesome. And then one more thing, and I'll stop talking so you guys talk. One more thing about that I really liked is that I think it sort of motivated me. Like I want to be able to find those things. Like I want to be able to go digging through my experiences and find those common experiences that we've all forgotten about because they're not normal in our society, and just bring them up and be like, remember, we have these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I would respond to your question around who I write for. I mean, for myself, of course, is where I begin in my journal. And then, of course, you know, for other mixed race people, I'm thinking about all the parents of mixed race kids out there who don't really consider the experience that their child is having on these deeper levels. But I think more broadly, like anybody who has this experience of feeling in between something, being in between cultures, in between identities, in between stages in their life, liminal states, I'm writing for them. You know, I feel like our world is so white supremacy culture is a part of why we see things in such binaries. And I think a lot of us are finding ways to push up against that. And for mixed race people, it's like more inherent that we intrinsically are just uncomfortable with those kinds of binaries. So, and I'm thinking too of Asian Americans. You know, I feel like some of my writing around race can resonate just with Asian Americans in general, because Asian Americans are in that in-between space, in the binary between Black and white. And so a lot of the experience I share as a mixed race woman are pretty similar to someone who is, you know, 100% Asian. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I also would hope that everyone, even if you don't, even if you're not mixed race or obviously occupy some liminal identity, I think all humans, no matter what, have such complexity to their identities, but we're not encouraged to see that a lot of the time. And so whether, I don't know, you have heritage from multiple countries or speak multiple languages or have lived in multiple places, or there are just so many possibilities. And so I would hope that reading about writing your characters that are mixed race in a way would remind you, if you don't occupy a mixed race identity, remind you of the complexity of your own identity, and that it is not only okay, but actually really great to think of yourself in terms of many different things, and then that is a strength rather than a weakness.
Thank you for these great insights. I'm going to bring Candace on to see if she has any questions from the viewers.
Yeah, I do. There is one that came in, and it's for the whole panel. So the question is, what advice do you have for mixed writers who are just stepping into their space and telling their story for the first time, or are new to claiming being a writer?
Take Anne's class.
Yeah.
This is actually a commercial for my next class. No. I just say trust in that desire to write and to claim your voice and to write a lot and to not worry about publishing from the, for a while, and just really do a lot of free writing and generative writing and get to that place where you can write without censoring, write without that, judge looking over your shoulder, who's reading this. Let yourself say anything and just tap into your voice more and more that way. And then find community. Yeah, in classes, in writing groups, find people you can then share your work with when you're ready, because that will keep you accountable to continuing to write and polish and take it to the next level.
I think for me, one thing that was really helpful about Anne's class too is that, like I said, I'm really good at self-censoring myself and like either just like avoiding talking about race at all, or like just getting squeamish. Like if Anne asked a really direct question that we're supposed to journal or like write about, I'd be like, oh, I can't do it. And so like giving yourself permission to sort of be in that space, and then trying to get, it's both, right? Like give yourself permission to be in that space, but also like kind of push yourself to be like, all right, friend, we're gonna sit here for like 10 minutes and it's gonna be uncomfortable, but we're gonna do it, and just practice.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to remember that it's an evolutionary process. And so not only are you learning craft when you're taking a class, but you're also learning about yourself, and you're learning how your ideas are sort of being processed by yourself. And I think that as you write more, I think it's that process of discovery that you're going to find more and more understanding about who you are and how you want to write about that. So.
Yeah. And I'll just say one more thing, just trust in the inherent value of your story, whoever you are. We all, like, I think we oftentimes compare, oh, my story is not as dramatic or not as exciting or not as important on some level. But we all have these, core human emotions that are universal that we can express through our writing and that other people can relate to and connect to. So just trust in that.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add one thing that Anne's class helped me with too a lot was just being okay with writing for myself and knowing that I'm still a writer if I'm just writing for myself at a moment in time, and you don't have to be published and be submitting a ton of stuff and be recognized to be like a serious writer. You can write and still be a writer, and that is okay. And it's a long process and journey.
There was a quick follow-up from that same questioner, if there is actually another class and when that is.
Oh, well, I'm teaching a class called Discovering Your Story as kind of a memoir creative nonfiction class for women of color starting in October. And then I'll probably do another Shapeshifting in 2022, but not till then.
And I wonder if I can just ask a question. It's kind of related to what Rebecca kind of was saying before about, all of us having a lot of different identities. If it's, just in, no one's purely any one thing, I guess. And when I've written to try and learn something, I've gone back to it later and found it to be, wrong or in error in some way. And I wonder if that has been any of your experiences and what you do with that writing once you go back to it and are just like, that definitely wasn't, I just went down the wrong path with that.
I once heard Nikki Giovanni speak about this, and she talked about how you can't judge that version of you, and it's completely fine for you to change. And I think somebody on this panel talked about that too, growing and evolving over time. So like it's completely fine for you to contradict yourself. Even like you wrote something when you were 20 and you wrote something now and it's different, and you're different. So give yourself grace and permission. Is that what is that what you mean by wrong? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely different versions of yourself from the past that that now you're just like, I would never say that now, or I would never, I would never write that now, or even that you've just learned more things. You've learned more since and have realized that you were.
And I think we always will be doing that. So it's like none of that writing and that processing is wasted because you had to go through that writing and that process to get to where you are now. You might not want to go back and publish it per se, but even if it had been published, it's okay because we have our core obsessions that we're drawn to, and we're always exploring those same kind of questions and evolving our thinking. And we're never done, we never arrive at the answer to our angst.
Yeah, and maybe even the next writing prompt, if you find something like that, could start writing about why you do see that as wrong now and what's led you to a point where you see it differently, and maybe even quote yourself or go off of that as a prompt. Could be a cool way to look at it differently.
You could annotate it.
Yeah.
A cool hermit crab essay.
Or you could make it fiction.
Yeah, it's true. Like when I talked about how like a lot of my writing before was more like trying to get a reaction, like when I go back and read that, like I was writing about being mixed race then too, and like the examples that I chose, like it was very like, yeah, like you're looking at me, you don't see what's going on in my head at all. And so like reading those now, I'm like, oh, like but that's where I was. So that's where those pieces get to be.
I've got a couple other questions here. So for the whole panel, how do you grapple with any non-acceptance from the communities belonging to your non-white side, if you've experienced that?
Anyone?
I almost wonder, I feel like I'm like trying to think of examples now in my head. I feel like the non-acceptance is often like myself telling myself that I don't belong in these spaces more than somebody else telling me that I don't belong. Like, I'm not sure. Like, I remember having a conversation with Black people when I was in grad school. I was like, we were a part of this like mentorship program where we worked with students of color. We'd like mentor them over the summer. And after all the meetings, like me and these other couple of Black people would like hang out and talk afterwards. And they were like, of course you can claim your Black side. And it was like this mysterious, magical moment for me where I was like, really? I belong with you guys? Like,
I think that that's really true about claiming that space for yourself, because I've always felt like I didn't quite belong to this or that until I decided I can claim those spaces. And so I have been in spaces where it's Filipino Americans, and then I also then go to the Mexican American group, and I just decided that this is where I belong to. And so I think a lot of it had to be, it was in my own head that I did, because I was seeing the differences, and maybe they weren't necessarily seeing them, but I was, and I just had to make that claim for myself.
Yeah, I think when we can come to see how we can both belong and not belong in any given space, and how so many people feel that, it's just so universal. So yeah, like me claiming my mixed race identity is one layer. And then I've also had to claim my Asian American identity, my Chinese American identity, my identity as a woman of color. And all of these have layers of, do I belong here? Yes, no. Well, let me focus on the layer that I do belong and that I can claim solidarity. And I think that just widens my community and capacity to listen and belong and not hide away. And
yeah, I like that idea of widening and flipping it to think of that in a positive way, that we do belong to multiple communities just by definition, and that it can be thought of in that way rather than belonging less to multiple communities. But yeah, I mean, I think it does take a lot of conscious choice and effort and shape-shifting at times.
Well, the last question here, this audience member is thanking you for sharing your experiences in writing. They are also a mixed race person, aspiring writer, and the conversation resonates a lot. They are wondering if you have any other suggestions of texts and authors that have inspired you in the process of your own writing.
Well, yeah, like just locally, Sharon Chang wrote Raising Mixed Race, and that focuses on raising mixed Asian children, but that book blew me away, and her follow-up memoir. I still haven't read Crying in the H Mart, but I really want to. There's so many books. In fact, I could email you my list. I'm drawing a blank of what to call out. You guys speak.
And I'm trying to think through other readings we did in the class too, because there were so many great ones. I mean, just off the top of my head, I remember the Bill of Rights for racially mixed people by Maria P.P. Root was really great. Just a short piece, but very empowering in few words, and something that you could riff off of as well.
Really liked Kiese Layman's book of essays, How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America, and specifically one of the essays, You Are the Second Person. And it just, he calls himself out, and he calls you as the reader out about sort of, again, for me, looking at how I try and pass in society, and sort of hope. I really liked it. I used it a lot as a writing prompt too, like, how am I slowly killing myself and others in America, which sounds really dark, but sort of making me think about sort of the ways in which I'm hurting myself by trying to contort myself into various things, and then also the ways that I'm actually hurting other people by doing that. And so that was a really helpful writing prompt, and also like really eye-opening, insightful essay.
Also, T. Kara Madden, Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls, is a great memoir. Faith Adiel, Stealing Faith. She was like the first Black Buddhist nun in Thailand. There's a lot, but there's a lot of books. I mean, there's not a lot. There is and there isn't. I mean, there are books by mixed race people, and yet there are still so few that that's why I'm like, to call out, you know, as the exemplary example. Yeah. And then there are people with mixed heritage that don't necessarily identify as mixed race, like Jasmine Ward. We read one of her essays in class. Yeah. Anjali and Jetty has a new collection of essays and novel out. She's mixed Puerto Rican and Indian and Austrian. So there's a lot. Yeah. If you contact me through my website, and I can email you my reading list.
Yeah, I guess I should point out Kiese Layman is not mixed race. I just found his stuff very useful for generating mixed race identity prompts.
Yeah. Donna Miscolta.
Donna!
Both of you.
And then I have to show you my book that's coming out in September.
Yay!
Radical.
There is one more that just came in. I wonder if I can just squeeze it in here. This audience member is wondering, what are the terms or language you're using as stepping stones towards the complexities of identifying, it says our, but your paradoxes as multicultural individuals? Are using duality or cultural ossification or binary opposition? It's maybe a big question, or it's got a lot of words in it. But I think it's just maybe getting to the point of what kind of terms are you using.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, in the most simplest terms, I call myself multiracial or mixed race, and then I, depending on the context, I might say I'm mixed Chinese or I'm mixed Chinese and white, but I still have a very a difficult relationship with calling myself white, because I'm not white, but what is white? There's that whole question we could talk about for hours and hours. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question, because we run into, kind of as I was talking about at the beginning, we run into having insufficient words for many situations. And I feel like the more words and time I have, the better it's going to be, whatever I'm talking about myself. And I mean, that's very much been the case with my name too, because I have a very long hyphenated name, and I've written about that as well. It never fits on anything. But I think this is a really important question to pose and think about, because language is so important in shaping how we see ourselves and how we see others. And, the boxes we have to check, the, tiny space we have to fit some not wholly accurate version of our identity, some label, is going to affect how we think about ourselves. And obviously we're not going to get to a point where we get to write 500 words every time we have to put our racial identity or something. But I guess I'm just trying to say I don't have a great answer right now, but I think the more complexity and nuance we're allowed, the better.
Yeah. I mean, this question just points to why we as mixed race writers have so much to explore in this arena, because language is always changing in the way we identify and the way, who knows, like how long the term person of color will even be used, right? Mm-hmm. It's always changing. And so we have an opportunity to push up against the labels and the terms that just don't sit right with us. Mm-hmm. But that's, it's edgy territory, it's not everyone's going to like what we say, but that's part of what finding community that is accepting of exploring those questions can do for us, is to push into those questions and areas that people haven't fully gone yet, or still, so much more to say.
Yeah, I think it really depends on who's asking it and what. It depends on the context of the situation. Like I said at the beginning, like I hate boxes, and like I will grudgingly check them if necessary. But sometimes if you ask me, depending on who you are, if you ask me who I am, or what I am or whatever, I'll just be like, well, I'm writing a book about it. Eventually you can read it then, because I refuse to answer this question. So yeah, we need more words.
And I think it also depends on where those words are coming from, who's creating those words. Is it the people who identify as that, as a mix or whatever it is, or is it coming from, a census, a government categorization, because it's going to make it easy for them to categorize people and count people. And do they get it right? Most of the time they don't, as Rebecca pointed out in her essay. So it really depends on who's creating those labels, I think.
Well, that is it for questions. I wonder if you wanted to offer some closing remarks, Donna.
Well, I just want to thank Anne for first of all for offering this class that we were able to take. I want to thank all of you for joining me here. I want to thank again for Culture, because they've supported the project I'm working on, which was my impetus for taking Anne's class. And I just want to invite you to remember that Anne has a book coming out in September, and it's sure to be something that is going to be of great interest to so many of us. So, and I want to thank you all for joining us tonight, viewers out there, whoever you are.
I know, I wish I could see you all.
You too.
Me too.
Link
Well,
hearts.
I wanna thank you all for speaking tonight, and on behalf of Town Hall, and it's been so thoughtful, and really, the tone of it has taken us to a different place. So I really appreciate that. And I wanted to mention to the audience too that we have a couple links in the chat where you can go learn about a little bit more about some of our speakers' work. Rebecca doesn't have a website yet, but I'm sure she will. So you can check those out and learn more about Donna and Anne's and Sarah's work. Hopefully we will see you all in person sometime soon. But until then, I hope that you all have a great night and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you,
Thank
Anne.
you so much.
Yeah. And happy birthday, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you.